We'd all heard the rumours, but we didn't want to believe them. We were unprepared and unaware. We didn't stand a chance. They had come for us. The morning was calm but dreary. The light from the sun on our 12th day struggled to make it through the fog that had rolled in overnight. It was as if this alien land was trying to hide from us, but was already on its way. Oblivious, everyone woke up with little important to do, besides a bit of mining indoors. But Enzo couldn't help himself. Our new comms system was yet to be used, and he found the buttons and switches far too enticing. So like a 5-year-old first learning how to use a telephone, he dialed anybody and everybody that was in range. After he was done, he checked everyone's attitude towards our fledgling little settlement. It was not good, with only one group amicable towards us. And speaking of amicable, our guests from the woefully named Intimacy Cave had left to head home. They'd lived here long enough to know when the heavens were about to open up. We'd all heard the rumours, but we didn't want to believe them. We were unprepared and unaware. We didn't stand a chance. They had come for us. We didn't have a single firearm to our names, and if the rumours were to be believed, a single bite could lead to death. The last of the Intimacy Cave clan was still leaving, lagging behind, frail and half-blind, and managed to escape the coming onslaught by a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, we were still all in shock about our new visitors, and common sense eluded us, as we spent the precious little time that we had moving our beds from one side of the room to the other. We wandered around as aimlessly as they did, our fate drawing ever closer. But we couldn't wait for divine intervention any longer. It was time to formulate a plan. Everyone formed up outside our hut in an effort to take out our assailants one at a time in hand-to-hand combat. Ill-advised it may be, we had little option. In the panic, only Elenia had grabbed a spare log to defend herself with. But there was no time for regrets. Enzo drew the short straw, and the first zombie leading the charge lunged for him. With the others covering, they took the zombie off guard from behind. Alex punched the zombie in the back of the head, and the zombie retaliated by swinging round and biting him in the chest. Things were not going well, but we had no choice. The brawl ensued. Multiple injuries were sustained, but we finally put down our first undead to rest, even though it cost Alex a fatal injury. We panted and tried to recover our breath, but there was no time. Another half dozen were bearing down on us. Only then did we realise that base defences might have fared better. But for now, all we could do was run. So run, we did. Alex, being injured and slowest, was the first to be targeted by the walkers. This was the opportunity that Enzo and Elenia needed. If Alex could keep up the pace, he could lead the Zeds on a merry chase around the region, while Enzo and Elenia could set up a rudimentary defensive turret. Enzo and Elenia had made it back to base. Alex had never been so far from it. We hadn't even realised we'd been running all night. Unfortunately, a couple of zombies downwind caught a whiff of what little hope we had, and began following our duo instead of Alex. While Enzo ate his last meal, Elenia started the plan. The blueprints were placed and construction had begun, and while the first zombie had temporarily lost interest, the second didn't have the same wavering bloodlust, and again it was time to separate the group. Elenia had to run, and in the commotion, Enzo made it back to the half-constructed turret in an effort to complete it. But stressed and unaware, Elenia had run too far too fast, and the straggler zombie came right back to the racket that Enzo was making. We were divided, panicked, sleep-deprived, and running in all directions. But even injured, Elenia was the fastest runner, and while Alex was still making the run of his life, Elenia darted back to finish the improvised turret. And Enzo must have accidentally staggered on uneven terrain, was swiped at by the zombie chasing him down. But a day too late, Elenia had finished our first turret. It was a messy, inaccurate thing, but it was our best hope. Unfortunately, it was already being clambered on. Elenia didn't have a choice, she had to defend it. It was our only hope. Unbeknown to her friends, she was bitten, and she knew it. She was on borrowed time. The two zombies swarmed her as she fell to the ground, and thanks to her heroic efforts, 2 more zombies were downed. She was in shock and bleeding out. Suffering from fatal wounds and a raging infection, she would soon be as much a threat to the colony as the undead were. But there was no other option. Enzo waded through the rubble and pulled her back inside. In all the commotion, Alex had run out of steam, and the zombies had finally caught up with him. He lay beaten and bleeding on the ground, alone. With Elenia in bed and dying from her injuries, Enzo ran back outside in an effort to rebuild. Enzo was exhausted. He hadn't slept for 36 hours, but as ever, there was no choice. Piece by piece, he gathered what he needed to maintain hope. But it was too late. Our last standing colonist had to run. And run he did. The second night without sleep, and Enzo had finally made it to Alex. He made a valiant effort to bring him back to base. Valiant but foolhardy, the horde was already on top of him. So again, he ran. Gaining as much ground as he could from the undead, he tried to get our second turret live. But, as is the story with this place, when it rains, it pours. And pirates too had come to join the fray. And you can bet they were better prepared than we were. Enzo did what he could with the turret, but his work was cut short, yet again. And in an ever-cruel twist of fate, another escape pod from our ship. It must have been in orbit for the better part of 2 weeks, before making it through the planet's atmosphere. But what could have been a Hail Mary was yet another sick laugh in the face of our hopes. Montes was in as bad a shape as everyone else. Enzo, mad with panic and exhaustion, figured there was only one course of action left. If the pirates came looking for a fight is what they'd get. Shots buzzed past left and right. But not a single one hit home. Enzo might have done it. The pirates would be the distraction we needed. Whoever would win, we were given time. And for a second time, Enzo ran to bring Alex home. It wasn't long before the dead had overwhelmed the pirates. And soon they would leave the living and join the ranks of the horde. The gunfire had long since stopped by the time Enzo had reached Alex. The pirates must have been as new to this place as we were, as they weren't even able to down a single undead. The horde drew ever closer, and for the final time Enzo had to put Alex down on the ground. He set up a triage bed for him, placed him on it. Blinded by exhaustion, he headed for Montes to do the same, in hopes that simple bed rest would be enough to get him back on his feet. But it was all too much and Enzo had collapsed. He woke to the zombies clawing at his face. With what little energy he had, he pushed off the 2 zombies, and still somehow managed to get away, heading for Montes in hopes that he would be able to return the favour somehow. But wounded and exhausted, he was too slow. He managed to pull Montes out the river, but couldn't make it more than a couple of steps before his pursuer ambushed him. And with a couple of swipes, he and Montes fell to the ground, crippled and bitten. And like everyone else, soon to join the horde. Day turned to dusk, and Elenia died from her fatal injuries in her sleep. The following morning, Elenia's corpse was up and about, wandering around the base. Alex would soon join her, as he too drifted into the abyss. And like Elenia, as if his injuries were nothing, he got up out of bed. Enzo lay next to Montez, his injuries becoming more severe by the hour, his friends dead, his hopes of ever returning home dashed, and his consciousness fading. The following morning, like everyone else in our story, Enzo died from his injuries. And like the rest, promptly got up and started surveying his surroundings for fresh meat. Ironically lucky for Montez, his wounds already made him smell like the dead. And Enzo's corpse left him be. Night 16, our comm station received its first signal from orbit. A trade vessel was hailing to barter. But its calls would remain unanswered.